Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Phyto Revival, the podcast. We are now in the second week of March, which is dedicated to mindfulness and mental health. So this week, I'd like to discuss a topic that everyone has encountered in some shape or form, and that is trauma. I do not intend to delve deeply in the cause or to distress you in any way as you go about your day. Whether you're on your way to work or dropping your kids off at school or engaged in any other activity while listening to this podcast, hopefully you're not going to trigger you in any way. Instead, I want to evaluate how effectively you manage your past traumas or your shadow self on a daily basis. The term shadow work or shadow self refers to Carl Jung's concept of our unresolved traumas that reside within us, lurking in the shadows, and they can emerge unexpectedly. So here with me today is my friend Kristi, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and kind of what her passions and things are.
Oh, me? Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I'm Kristi. So, yeah, I am learning to live life now as an adult, soon to be 50. So, working, of course, but also enjoying bowling, roller derby, and grandchildren.
Grandchildren, they are cute too. So in your own words, when you think of trauma, what is the first things or the first keywords that kind of come to your head?
Emotions, roller coaster emotions for sure. Having dealt with a traumatic childhood and then going right from that into a traumatic marriage, most of my life has had trauma, and it's
So
regulating your emotions is tough.
yes, you've been kind of in a like fight and flight your whole life, and now you're trying to learn how to step out of that fight and flight and actually be present in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not easy. And there's a lot of people do struggle with that because if you think about it, the brain isn't fully developed until you're 25, and most children have children before the age of 25. So we are essentially underdeveloped brains raising underdeveloped brains when our ourselves and our journey hasn't really brought us the tools we need to be able to navigate and not inflict our trauma on others. We don't really have the tools for it.
Totally agree with that.
So when you're in the workspace or even just around friends, what is one of the things that you see a lot that other people do that kind of make that you can tell that their trauma's been triggered and that they just kind of like, I don't know, like maybe like they explode, or what is kind of some of the most common traits that you see when you're out and about that at our age that we should have more control over?
Yeah, there's both kinds. There's the kind that explodes easily at things that should not be a big deal. And then there's the kind that just shuts down at things that should not be a big deal.
So one of the things I do when I work with clients is I tell them that from the moment you're born, before you were born, you were in a nice, cozy, warm womb in the perfect temperature. You never had hunger pains. You never felt any distress, really. I mean, of course, there's complicated pregnancies. But then when you're born, you're now feeling cold air and physical touch for the first time and overstimulation completely. And you instantly, pretty very quickly after being born, you realize that you are dependent on someone else for your survival because you can't feed yourself, you can't get up and walk and get help, you can't communicate. You're 100% reliant on someone else. And in that process, we start to unknowingly start hiding authentic parts of ourselves and to appease those around us to ensure our survival. So being in survival mode is pretty much something that we completely begin with at the beginning of our life. And then depending on how you're raised, you may not feel confident to speak your truth or feel confident to say when something's not right because the oh my God, I can't talk. What's that word? Ramifications?
Ramifications.
There you go, that word. That sometimes they're very severe, and while other people never experience that, but yet were encouraged to speak their own truth. And then you have these children that go to school and start learning that their self-worth is based on their friend group, or their self-worth is based on how well they do in school. And so now they're trying to conform and to be something that they're not designed to be in order just to feel accepted in society. And then that continues on in dating. These survival skills that served us as a child, we're carrying along with us, but we don't know how to recognize when we no longer need that survival skill, because now it has become part of who we are. It's our brain is now wired to respond that way. And then we get into adulthood. And I mean, you think about it in the military, you're told to go into the military, or when you do go into the military, they prefer people from age as low as 17 and up, but they prefer the people that are younger than 25. And the reason being is yes, of course, they're more physically fit and all the obvious reasons, but it's also because their brain isn't fully developed and you can shape it and conform it to what you need for a battle scenario. So, knowing all of that now, have you ever thought about that type of perspective of your childhood?
Mm. My childhood was mainly shaped by my mother. I don't think she really understood what she did, not until she was practically on her deathbed and she had like an awakening, but because she was in her own world and she didn't realize what her actions were doing and how they were affecting to her children.
I think that's common a lot, and especially when people think that they're ready to shape and conform a young mind, but they themselves are not quite ready. I've even heard of people having kids just so they had a friend or a partner or a companionship because nobody else in the world understands them. But when you're always looking for validation and acceptance outside of yourself, then you're always going to be searching because everyone else is in their own little world trying to figure themselves out too. And I feel like there's usually a lot of miscommunication. And from what I've seen and what I've encountered is a lot of people, especially people that have unresolved trauma. And these little shadow selves do pop up, especially in times of conflict. Because I do remember one time I told my brother when he asked if I could be a mediator between him and my mom. And I asked him, I go, okay, well, what's your purpose for the conversation? What do you want out of it? And he goes, well, I want her to apologize. And I go, okay, well, do you want an apology to know that you're right? Or do you want her to understand the actions that made you feel the way that they did, and have a conversation with her and let her understand fully the effect it had on you, and then you guys come up with a way to never encounter or how to handle that situation going further, because I do believe that everyone is responsible for their traumas. And even in my therapy session today with the VA, she had asked me, like, what do I expect from other people? And I told her, I go, honestly, I can't expect anything from other people because I can't control other people. So if I have expectations that this person needs to act this way or this person needs to do this, but I'm not communicating it, how the heck are they supposed to know?
Right.
I go, so what I do expect is I do expect authenticity. I do expect transparency. And I believe that the difference between transparency and honesty is transparency is being honest before an event, where honesty is being transparent after an event.
Mm.
And so I like to know who I'm around and what to expect. And I want to know your traumas. I want to know your triggers, but it's not my job to tiptoe around anyone else. It is, and I don't expect anyone to tiptoe around me. It is completely my job to understand my emotions. If you have you ever had an emotion that felt like kind of silly, stupid, like why am I angry over that? Have you ever had one of those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
do you what do you do in that moment?
That's when you have to take a step back and figure out what it is you're actually angry at. because more than likely it's not the thing in front of you, it's something from inside you.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because I kinda had that when I was at the shop with my office chair. I So, sorry, had to pause for a second, I got distracted. ADHD for the win. But anyways, my office chair, it's I don't know why, but anytime someone would sit in it without asking permission, I would get angry, and I didn't know why I was getting angry. And I'm sitting here like, "Okay, why?" And I knew it was irrational, and I knew it didn't make sense. So I really spent some time thinking about it, and I was like, "Why would that make me angry? Why would I be angry about that?" And then I started thinking about it. I grew up in a house where I'm the oldest with younger siblings. I always had to share everything. Then I was in the military. You're always sharing everything. And then I had kids, and you share everything, even all of your personal space. So what I realized was that what that share represented was something that was truly just mine, something I didn't have to share with anyone else. And even though it was silly, as a child, it's almost like resource guarding, like, "This one's mine. You can have everything else, but this one's mine." So then once I realized that it was stemming from essentially childhood of not really having a lot that was just mine and always having to share everything, I think it's important to step back and say, "No, I had every right to feel angry and upset because it was a response from when I was a child, but now I'm not a child. Now I'm an adult, and that emotion is not serving me anymore. So I don't need to get angry because they're sitting in it. I can ask, hey, if you don't mind, I just appreciate it if you just ask permission first. I know it sounds silly. It's just a little quirk of mine, but it just helps me with some of my traumas that I'm trying to resolve. And you don't have to go elaborate and explain anything, but I think it is really important that we take a step back, but you have to validate your younger self or
Mm.
how whatever age you were. You have every right to feel the way that you're feeling in that moment, but you don't have the right to act on an emotion that you had for survival as a child because it's not serving you as an adult. And all it's going to do is trigger other people's trauma. And it is 100% your responsibility to get back in touch with who you are and really get to know yourself and just be with yourself. And now I kind of find myself analyzing everything. Like, I don't hate anybody. I'm disappointed in people, but I don't hate them. And I absolutely am not perfect. And just like no one else is perfect. But I think when it comes to resolving, especially in relationships, is that accountability number one. If you want to really break the ice with someone, start out the conversation about how you're taking accountability for how you could have been better. Because I do believe that if, especially an argument and a fight has been going on for years, both parties could have done better.
Mm.
Because we're human. Nobody's perfect. Everybody always has room for improvement. So start off with what you could have done better. And instead of attacking somebody for what they need to improve and how you think that they should do things, remember you cannot control them. And the more you try to control someone else, the more out of control you actually become. And so when you realize that when you're navigating through life and it's really about being in control of yourself, how you react,
Mhm.
how you behave in situations, then you're going to find that there's not really a lot to argue with. And when that's another thing, when people argue, arguing is pointless because when somebody's arguing, that means you're not listening. Because you can either have a conversation and you have to listen twice as much as you talk in conversations. But when you're arguing, you're not listening anymore and you're only listening enough to respond. You're not listening to understand. And I think that a lot of people in the world are just stuck in that fight and flight in that trauma state to where they are just responding to everything instead of stopping and being in the moment and trying to learn, why are you responding that way? What can I do better? And how can I be better for those around me and my loved ones? So what do you think about that?
Couldn't say it any better myself. Yes. That's one of the biggest lessons people have to learn is that you can't control the event or the other people, but you can control how you yourself respond.
And it is hard. It is hard sometimes, especially when someone's hurt you really deeply because you want them so badly to understand how bad that they hurt you. At the same time, you don't want to show your vulnerability. And I get it, but does take a lot of practice. But when you're able to walk away from a situation and not have gone in the reactive state, that is when you are truly free because you are no longer a prisoner of your emotional response. And I've seen that the word emotional intelligence is coming out a lot more and more. And essentially, what that means is just being in check with your own emotions and validating yourself and understanding and responding in a way that is for healing instead of ego, proving that you're right and that you need to hear that you are right. And again, that is another trauma response because as a child, you might have always been told you're wrong. I always think of Matilda, I'm big, you're little, I'm smart, you're not, however he says it. But essentially we feel like that as a culture with children. And that's something I don't understand is why we treat children, or that's another whole topic too, is about the how our expectations for our children are so high, but our expectations for ourselves, we won't do what we tell our children to do, but yet our children's brains are way more underdeveloped than ours. So maybe that'll be another podcast sometime. But is there anything else that you want to add to the topic?
I think, affirmations are a big thing in today's world. And I think one of the big affirmations that I like to say is to let me move through the world today with love and understanding. And if people would do that more, there would be less arguing and more understanding.
And so I just want to add something to that affirmations, when you say affirmations, they actually can help rewire the brain. And it's a process that usually takes about 30 to 90 days to observe the initial changes and can take 3 to 9 months to fully create and integrate a new neuron connection. So with that being said, like I even tell this to my kids that the music you listen to, the way you talk to yourself, all of that matters because how you talk to yourself is going to be how you're going to let other people talk to you and treat you. So if you are being negative and that inner negative voice is just tearing you apart, you're going to let anyone tear you apart because that's the standard you'd set. So affirmations actually help raise that bar. And when you start treating yourself better, you actually start setting boundaries on what you're going to tolerate from other people and actually rewiring how you're going to live your life, which will eventually change your whole perspective and your whole life in general. It affects everything like a ripple. So, were you aware of that? Probably because you're smart girl. All right. Well, so is that it for today? Maybe.
Keep going.
No worries. Well, I just want to thank you guys for listening again. And today was just kind of you guys listening in on a conversation with me and Kristi. And I guess we'll see you next week. Bye.